If you love cars, now is a very good time to be alive. I don't think there's been as much innovation since the invention of the motorized carriage as there has been over the last few years. Innovations in design and interiors and of course drivetrains. And thankfully it's not all just the preserve of one-off bespoke manufacturers and concept cars. I think it's fairly safe to say that the future has already gone mainstream. From all-electric city cars like our long-term BMW i3 to the fuel cell-powered Hyundai Tucson, all manner of so-called alternative fuel options are now on the market. The one that's most familiar though is the hybrid, like the Toyota Prius, where an internal combustion engine tag teams with an electric motor to provide the drive. And that technology itself has evolved. Previously, hybrid drivetrains were famous for being the choice of eco-friendly cars, but they've now found their way into hypercars like the Porsche 918 and even to the top flight of motorsport like in F1. And now you'll find them in properly everyday cars like this BMW X5, and it's added an extra trick to its repertoire. This X5 xDrive 40e is a plug-in hybrid. That simply means that instead of relying on a closed loop where the engine charges the battery, you as the driver can charge the battery yourself by plugging it into a socket at home. Or, if you feel like paying 25 grand for real convenience, you can install a BMW wall box and use that instead. Once charged, the plug-in hybrid X5 operates pretty much like a normal car, with the added benefit of reduced fuel consumption, thanks to the battery's ability to take over some of the driving duties completely. Total combined output from the 2-litre turbo motor and the electric motor, 230 kilowatts, 450 newton meters, driving all four wheels. And that really does feel as strong as it sounds. Those motors will work independently or together depending on conditions. And if you didn't have an instrument cluster in front of you, sometimes it's kind of difficult to tell which is doing what. And that's because the changeover from electric to petrol is seamless, and on top of that, at low revs the petrol motor is incredibly quiet. The gearbox is an 8-speed Steptronic with optional shift paddles, and the whole drive is smooth and easy. It feels way more effortless than any regular X5 I've driven. One of the things for which hybrid drives is famous is their fuel saving. The xDrive 40e obviously comes with that benefit too, but terms and conditions apply. If you've been following the progress of our BMW i3 range extender long-term car, you'll know that we get around a 200 kilometer range out of that car. Fortunately, the eDrive X5 with its petrol motor gives you a lot more than that. But the downside is, on pure electrical power, even with a fully charged battery, total range is only around 30 kilometers. And what that means for your fuel consumption is that, despite BMW's claim that this car will give you a return as low as 3.4 litres per 100 Ks, the electric motor really only comes into its own in traffic, where it can operate at far lower speeds for shorter distances. So no, it's not magically going to cut your fuel consumption in half. And because of that really short electrical range, to get the best out of it, you have to be quite disciplined, not only in the way you drive, but how you manage the battery. Best practice is to just make sure it's fully charged as often as possible, and that means plugging it in every chance you get. And ideally for 4 hours at a time, which is how long it takes for a full charge. And while it may not reduce fuel costs as dramatically as you might hope, there's no doubt that the hybrid drive does mean better fuel consumption. In our time with the car, we've managed a return of around 8.2 litres per 100 Ks. Not bad for a 2-ton SUV. SAV, sorry. For all that's different, there is a lot of X5-ness to that car. In fact, if it weren't for a few discreet badges and an extra filler cap, you probably wouldn't even realize that that is a hybrid. Overall, it's almost exactly the same as any other X5 model. And it has the same appeal that comes with any SUV, SAV, sorry. Muscular looks, chunky details, bigger wheels, and at least a sense that it can take on some rougher terrain. Compared to its competition, it certainly is the louder option, where the likes of the Audi Q7 and Volvo XC90 are super stylish and more minimalist. The X5 is aggressive. The interior too is regulation X5. There are no obvious signs that this is a hybrid besides the battery meter that forms part of the analog rev counter and this tiny eDrive switch, which allows you to select various drive modes that affect the way the battery power is used. As for the rest, it packs a decent layout, good materials and plenty of space. Interestingly, BMW have chosen to position the batteries for the electric motor below the boot floor, which means there's no option for a third row of seats in the xDrive 40e. Admittedly, the market for plug-in hybrid SUVs is tiny. So tiny, in fact, that the only options at the moment are this car and the Volvo XC90 T8 twin engine that we featured on the show a few weeks back, and they are remarkably similar. Both of them are hybrid drive SUVs of a similar size, and at 1.1 million rand, both cost almost to the last rand exactly the same amount. But for me, the Volvo is the better looking option. And on a more practical level, even with 200,000 rands worth of extras, this X5 can't match the standard spec of the XC90. And that for me means that the Volvo is the better option. The plug-in hybrid drivetrain of the X5 xDrive 40e delivers a satisfying punch, with a combined output of 230 kilowatts, delivering a smooth and surprisingly silent drive. The electric motor is best suited to city driving, but in mixed conditions the hybrid still delivers good fuel consumption. It looks and feels very much like a regular X5, but it certainly isn't the best value in its limited class.